Hey guys, it's Sidney Galpern here and welcome back to Sidney's Sweet Adventures. I'm so excited to have you back this week. I'm going to be showing you another Christmas in July themed project. So this week we're going to be using Isomalt to create a snowy, icy, frozen themed cake topper using Isomalt. I'm going to be showing you a whole bunch of different techniques today. We're going to be making some awesome graphic ice shards, we're going to be making a beautiful design sleigh, and we're also going to be making a glowing snowy tree. So let's get started!
I'm Sidney Galpern, owner of SimiCakes.com, and I'm a sugar artist. For the past 13 years, I've specialized in Isomalt sugar, traveling the globe teaching my techniques to the world. I'm the inventor of Simi Isomalt, and both my parents now work full-time for me, which is fun, most of the time. Follow me on my journey creating awesome works of sugar, chocolate, and cake art. Whether I'm in the studio or hitting the road, come along with me on my sweet adventures.
So we're going to start this cake topper with the pieces that are going to take the longest to cool, which is going to be the base and the big shards that are going to go in the background. So of course we are using Simi Isomalt today. Simi Isomalt is my line of pre-cooked Isomalt, so it's all tempered and ready to use. All you have to do is melt it down in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid. So it's super easy, no temperatures or recipes. It's basically just a sugar-free hard candy, and it's going to make it so easy to work with. Now remember that Isomalt is very hot, so make sure you are wearing your gloves. It's about 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius when you're working with it, so it is quite hot. Make sure you wear your gloves. I know some people can be intimidated by Isomalt because of the heat, but you cook and use ovens and stoves all the time if you make cakes or you bake or you cook, so don't be afraid, just wear your gloves, be careful, don't stick your finger in it, and you won't have any problem. So we're going to be starting off, like I said, with making our ice shards. So we'll do that first. So you can see I have my flex form molds down here. So these are Simi flex form molds. They're basically just a stretchy silicone tube, and you can shape these into any shape that you want. You can make paisleys and freeform bases. You can make hearts if you use a couple of them. So you can see I have some laid out here in just some triangular shapes to make some shards. These are going to be awesome ice shards that work great on the top of your cake, on the side of your cake. It's going to mirror that frozen, icy castle look, mountains in the background. There's so many different things that you can apply this to. So we're going to be doing a couple different versions of these, but the first one is just going to be some nice, clear, glassy blue shards. So I have my Isomalt already preheated here. Remember, 30 seconds in the microwave and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid. Now remember to keep those bubbles out of your Isomalt. You always want to bring your Isomalt to a boil and then let it settle. You don't want any boiling and bubbling bubbles inside your Isomalt when you're pouring it, otherwise you're just going to pour those bubbles into your piece. But it is important to get it to a boil in the microwave because that brings out all the air that was mixed in if you mixed in color or flavor. So bring it to a boil in your microwave, take it out, let it settle and rest on room temperature for a minute or two until all of those bubbles stop boiling and it's nice and flat. Don't worry about any little stray bubbles that may just be hanging out or sitting there or stuck to the bowl because we can get rid of those later. But that's how you're going to get that nice glassy Isomalt. Now I am working with already colored blue Isomalt. I did add in just the teeniest, tiniest quarter of a drop of purple just to make it a little bit of a cooler, deeper blue, but of course you can add in whatever kind of color that you want for your shards. Now remember that you can only add in airbrush color, edible airbrush color, which is a water or alcohol based, or a powdered color, luster dust or petal dust, not gel color, because gel color will break down the Isomalt. You can also mix in flavorings. Those are going to be an oil-based works best because it's nice and potent and doesn't thin down the Isomalt. So all we're going to do, I laid these out on my nice TFX coated, Teflon mat here, and that Teflon mat is going to release from Isomalt so I can use it over and over again. If you don't have this, I recommend using a piece of aluminum foil that's been greased with some cooking spray. I don't really like to pour directly on the silicone mat because it can sometimes bubble up from the heat. And so all I'm going to do, I don't have to grease any of these because these are silicone and this is coated Teflon, so I'm just going to pour just enough to cover over the bottom of these ice shards to start. There we go. So you can see it's nice and crystal clear because I let all those bubbles boil themselves out. You may collect some bubbles on the bottom, on the underneath, but that's totally normal and we can completely get rid of those later with the torch, so don't worry about any bubbles that collect at the base. Okay. And I'm just going to use my tool, if I need to spread it into the corners. It looks like this spread. It was nice and hot, so it didn't have any trouble spreading on its own, but you can use a toothpick or a skewer if you need to help it along to spread into the crevices. Now we will let those cool for about 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the temperature of your room. until they are cool to the touch with a toothpick and completely firm and not bendable or warm anymore, and then we can unmold them. So I'm just going to put those off to the side. While we have that blue out, I'm also going to make our base, so it's super easy to make perfect bases using cake pans. So I'm just going to use my nice metal cake pan here. Because it is metal, I do have to grease it with some cooking spray, so I'm just using a little bit of cooking spray, and then I'm going to wipe it out with a paper towel just to make sure it's not too much. And then we'll use this just the same way we did the flex forms. I'm just going to fill in just enough to cover over the bottom and fill out that base. Now remember that metal conducts heat, so this is going to be very, very hot. Don't touch it. Put it in a place where you don't have to move it around while you're waiting for it to cool, or use oven mitts because it is very, very hot. The metal is going to be just as hot as the Isomalt. So another way that you can create really awesome ice shards is to use a design in the background. So these are Simi Isomalt transfer sheets. So they're basically a type of icing paper, but they're not like regular icing sheets. I developed these with icing images to work with Isomalt, so they transfer from the heat. So what happens is when you pour Isomalt on them, it's going to be a similar process to chocolate transfer sheets, except that these are not cocoa butter. They are a icing paper that is specifically made to stand up to the heat of Isomalt. And so you can see I printed out a design. It's going to absorb into that paper, and once it's cool, it peels off the plastic backing and it transfers that transparent design. When the Isomalt absorbs into the paper, it makes it even more translucent. So instead of pouring on my Teflon sheet or on my foil, I'm going to pour right onto here. So I'm going to do the same thing, just arranging my pieces here, and I can just kind of arrange them however I want to make a couple different shards, and then fill them right in with some clear Isomalt. If you have any stray bubbles that were sitting on the surface, I can just very lightly take my chef's torch, and I'm just going to torch those away very, very lightly. Okay, and we will go ahead and let those cool. As soon as they're cool, the base is going to pop right out from the mold, and I can wipe off any excess oil. That's going to be a perfect, just really strong, sturdy base for all of our decorations to attach onto. Then our flex form pieces, the flex forms will just peel right away when it's ready. The transfer sheet will peel right off of the back, so you can see I'm just removing the flex form pieces and then peeling that transfer sheet right away. It transfers the design. You don't have to cut it out, you don't have to trim it, nothing. It only transfers where the Isomalt is touching, and then you can reuse the excess sheet that you have left over. You can also clean up the edges by lightly torching over the edges where you need to clean. Then after about 10 seconds or so for the heat to sink in, you can use your scissors and silicone tools and things just to really perfect it and smooth it over. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will come back and make our beautiful snowy tree.
Are you ready to get started making your own Isomalt pieces? Are you tired of tempering it yourself and going 1 or 2 degrees over, causing the whole batch to turn yellow? Well, now with Simi Isomalt pre-tempered tiles, your worries can melt away. Simi Isomalt is a sugar-free hard candy that I formulated to make all your Isomalt projects a breeze. I developed Simi Isomalt to be super easy to use, so that means no matter if you're a very beginner or a seasoned sugar artist, it's going to work great. No more worrying about temperatures or recipes, simply melt the Isomalt in the microwave and bam, you're ready to start creating. Our Isomalt is crystal clear, made to have no bubbles in it, and works in any climate, which means sugar sculptures that melt after an hour in humidity are a thing of the past. Our Isomalt is featured every week on my CakeFlix live TV show, Sidney Sweet Adventures, and you can go to our website for tons of free Isomalt tutorials, tips, and tricks. Simi Isomalt is available in a wide array of colors, as well as our signature crystal clear. You can find Simi Isomalt on our website, simicakes.com, as well as cake supply stores all over the world. Check out the list on our website of our esteemed international distributors to find Simi Isomalt in a cake store near you. See you on my next sweet adventure.
Hey guys, welcome back. Next we are going to be making our snowy glowing tree. So I have my silicone mold down here that we're going to be using. This is another Simi mold, but remember that you can use any food safe high heat silicone mold, and basically it has all this beautiful tree detail in here. It's a 2-part mold with a hole on the top, so we're just going to secure it together with some rubber bands. I'm going to double loop my rubber bands so that they're nice and tight and hold together when we're pouring the liquid Isomalt in. And I'm also going to space them out nicely so there's one towards the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom. Okay. This is a nice firm silicone, so you don't have to worry about a sleeve. It's going to hold together beautifully. Okay, so now that it's together, I'm just going to line it up, make sure that all the pieces are aligning and fitting together perfectly on the bottom, the sides, the top. Perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and fill in our mold. So I have some more of that beautiful blue Isomalt here, and I'm going to fill in the mold very slowly. And now you could just fill it up solid, but we're actually going to be making this hollow so that we can put a light inside. And that's also going to make it a little bit more lightweight as well. So I filled it up, and then I'm going to be draining this out. And so by filling and draining it, another thing that it's going to do is help it to get into all the crevices so that it don't get any air pockets. Even if I were going to leave this solid, I would always do this filling and draining technique. If you guys saw my mini liquor bottle tutorial, it's the same idea, whereas filling and draining it is just going to kind of wiggle all the ice melt out into the crevices of the mold by flipping it back and forth. So I'm just going to fill and drain this about 3 to 5 times to get a nice thick layer, and then I will let this cool until it is solid. This mold would also work really beautifully with chocolate. I think that would be awesome to do some beautiful chocolate trees. You could put a filling inside of them, you could fill them with sprinkles, you could fill them with edible glitter, or of course how we are going to do our trees by putting the light inside of them. So you can see I just filled it up again and I'm draining it back out, draining all of the excess until it is just kind of stringy at the base and not too much more is pouring out. And then I just scrape off those extra bits. Don't worry about what that top edge looks like. That will be totally fine because we're going to clean all that up afterwards. Now if your Isomalt gets too thick as you're pouring because you're cooling it off as you're putting it in and out of the mold, you may have to just pop it back in the microwave to re-liquefy it, but the thicker it gets, it's also going to give you a thicker layer. So I usually, if I can get away with pouring it all at once without reheating it, I'll do that because the nice thick Isomalt is going to make a thicker, stronger layer on the outside. You could potentially alter how many layers you do as well. If you wanted this a little bit thicker and stronger, you could do more layers. If you wanted it a little bit thinner and more delicate and translucent, you could do it thinner. Make sure you drain out all of the excess because you don't want any of it pooling in the very top on that last pour. So we're just going to let this cool for about 30 minutes or so, depending on the temperature of your room, until it is completely solid before we unmold it. Okay, so it has been a little bit of time and now we can unmold our tree. So I have made sure with my tool first that it is all nice and cool, and then I'm just going to remove my rubber bands from the bottom here, just very slowly, not squeezing the mold so that I don't break anything. Alright, so there's 2 seams on either side of the top. I'm just going to use my fingers to push down and away on either seam to kind of get the suction out, and I can already see how beautiful that's looking. And I'm just going to slide my fingers down, and look how amazing that looks. Oh my gosh. So you're going to have that beautiful crystal tree. I'm just going to flex the other side. It's hollow here, so I can just kind of wiggle. Just kind of take your time, be patient with them, and pull out that tree, and look how absolutely incredible that looks. It is so pretty. It looks just like glass. And if I want to clean up any of these bottom edges, I'm just going to lightly torch them, and then I'll use my scissors to trim them right off after about 5 to 10 seconds for the heat to sink in, just like with our flex forms. So I'm just going to trim, and it'll usually just break right against that, almost like a score mark around the bottom edge. And then I can take those pieces and just remelt them back down. But look how absolutely cool that is. I cannot get over how beautiful that light reflects. And once we highlight it with a little bit of snow, it's going to make each one of those little branches pop. So for my edible snow, I use a couple different recipes. For this, I'm going to be using more of a paintable snow, so I want it to be a little bit thick and creamy and sticky to stick onto our tree. So to do that, I'm going to use a combination of dust. So I'm going to use from the Sugar Art, these are all from the Sugar Art because I absolutely love their colors. I'm going to be using white, and I'm also going to be using the Super Pearl. So the white is just a matte petal dust, the Super Pearl is a shimmery pearl dust, and then I'm also going to mix in just a teeny tiny bit of my diamond dust, which is an edible glitter, and that is going to mix together with a little bit of alcohol to make a paintable snow. So I'm going to grab a paintbrush here and just scoop a little bit of this pearl dust into my cup. Then I'm going to grab just a tiny bit, let's grab a paper towel here so I don't get dust everywhere. Okay. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of my white now, and I'm going to scoop that in. Pretty decent amount of white because that's going to be the bulk of our snow. And then I'm not going to add too much glitter, just enough to add a little bit of a sparkle. I'm going to be very careful with this because glitter likes to go everywhere. And just give it a little sprinkle. There we go. Now I'm just going to add a couple drops of alcohol at a time, so I'm just using, you can use vodka or Everclear, I'm just using a little bit of vodka. And I don't want to make this too runny, I want to make it almost like a creamy, cakey snow so that it sticks, just like real snow. If it's too wet, it's going to look like it was painted on, and we want it to have a little bit of body to it. Perfect. Now I'll just take this, and I'm just going to catch wherever the snow would naturally catch on the branches. So I'm just going over, and this is just going to make some of those sharper edges pop just a little bit. We'll be right back before we start making our sleigh.
I'm Sidney Galpern, owner of SimiCakes.com, and I'm a sugar artist. For the past 13 years, I've specialized in Isomalt sugar, traveling the globe teaching my techniques to the world. I'm the inventor of Simi Isomalt, and both my parents now work full-time for me, which is fun, most of the time. Follow me every Wednesday on my journey creating awesome works of cake, chocolate, and sugar art. Whether I'm in the studio or hitting the road, come along with me on my sweet adventures. Watch Sidney's Sweet Adventures every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on CakeFlix Live TV.
Hey guys, welcome back. Now we finally get to start making our beautiful sleigh. So I have my mold that I'm going to use. This is a Simi sculpture mat. So basically it has all of the flat pieces that you pour in Isomalt, and then you put them together when they're cool and it creates a 3D sculpture. Isn't that awesome? So I have my sleigh mold here. All the pieces are going to fit perfectly together, and then I also cut up some pieces of that same transfer sheet that we used for the shards, and those are going to fit right on top. So you can actually use the transfer sheets not just to pour on top of, but to lay over top or over the back of certain molds and get the design inside. There's so many different ways that you could apply these, so I wanted to show you how to do that. So we're going to start with just one of our simple rectangle pieces or square pieces here. So I have a piece cut out with my scissors that is going to fit right on top. Now remember that with the transfer sheets there is a matte side and there is a shiny side. The shiny side is the plastic, so that goes up. You want the matte paper side to go down against the Isomalt, otherwise you'll have a beautiful clear piece when the plastic peels away. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that this is all positioned. It's going to go in the right direction. We have our clear Isomalt here that we let settle really, really well so we won't get any bubbles in it. And now we're just going to fill this up. It has some nice deep walls and thick walls to hold all the Isomalt in place as long as you pour nice and slow. Okay, and I'm going to do this piece by piece. I'm not going to pour all of the cavities at once when using the transfer sheets, because the hotter the Isomalt is, the better it will transfer. So you see how I just very quickly spread it into the corners. I'm going to pop any bubbles that may be sitting on the surface, and then very, very quickly, as soon as you pour it, you're going to lay the Isomalt transfer sheet right on, and you'll see it absorbing in. So I'm trying to make sure there's no air pockets that are getting in. And you can use a toothpick or your gloved hand to just kind of push it out to the edges and make sure it's all spread out perfectly. And it makes it easy because once it absorbs, you can really see how transparent it makes it, and you can see that exact cavity. So it just makes it super duper easy. Okay, perfect. So we'll repeat this with the other cavities. So I'm going to do one of my sleigh sides here. The bottom strands dry very quickly, so you may not notice the transferring in those places because sometimes it cools too much by the time you lay the transfer on. But that's not a big deal because we're going to be painting the rails a different color later anyway, so you wouldn't see the transfer. So all I'm going to do is just very slowly and carefully, a small bowl or a bowl with a pour spout is going to make this the easiest to fill into all of our little rails at the bottom. There we go. Had to hold my breath for that part, but I'm just going to very quickly make sure that's all spread into all the cavities. You can see I just went around all of the little sections to break it up, and then I will attach my transfer sheet right onto the top. So just starting in one place and kind of letting all of the air work its way out. There we go. Mostly focusing on the top sections here, and then just letting it attach down onto the rails as well. Sometimes you gotta kind of push it. Remember, you can use your tools so you don't risk hurting your fingers. And there we go. So I'm just going to repeat that process with all of our pieces, and then we're going to let our Isomalt cool until it's solid for about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, the sleigh is cool, so I'm going to start out by just peeling away all of our transfer sheet pieces. Sometimes a little bit sticks onto the edges. That's okay because we can just brush it off with a paintbrush to get any of that excess paper to come off, and it will just melt away once you wash off the mat. So I'm just peeling away that transfer sheet first, and then I'm going to very carefully unmold my sleigh pieces here. And there we go. Look at that beautiful design. It's a very subtle, very icy kind of design in there. And I am going to torch away some of those bubbles on the surface, so I'm just going to lay this down flat here while I unmold the other pieces. Alright. I'm going to use my paintbrush and just kind of brush off any of this excess that's going to go around the edge, and then we'll put it together. Now I'm going to melt away some of those bubbles that may have accumulated on the surface of the silicone mold before I put the whole thing together so that it is nice and crystal clear. Okay, now to put it together, we're going to use our torch to put everything together. So I actually assemble it sideways. So I'm going to start by flipping one of the sides of the sleigh so that it is face down. So the Isomalt side is face down, the paper side is face up. And I'm going to use the torch just to attach all of the pieces. So this is going to be the bottom. I'm going to put the Isomalt side up. It doesn't really matter which side you do. You just want to make sure you're not torching on the part that has the paper on it. So you can see how I'm just going to torch, not while holding it, if I can help it, along that edge, and then very, very quickly stick it down onto the paper. I'm just going to hold that there for a second to make sure it all assembles. I'm going to look at it, make sure it's straight and it's not moving around or tilting. And it's very important to just let these pieces cool in between attaching them. So you can see that I just attached that base on first. Let that cool a minute. Alright, then we can go ahead and attach the back of the sleigh. So that is going to be torched in two places where it's going to sit on the bottom, plus along the base. There we go. Making sure to pick it up by the side that was not torched. And remember, once Isomalt is stuck, it is stuck, so try and get it exactly where you like first. Slide it just a little bit if I need to. And then the same thing, make sure it all looks straight. Cool it off for just a second here, and we have our back. Alright, then we're going to sit our little seat inside. Now you don't have to necessarily use the little seat if you don't want to. If you were to leave it open, you could put a cupcake inside, you could fill it with chocolates or candies, so you don't have to use that seat if you don't want to, but I'm going to add it in since we're going to be leaving this sleigh empty. So I'm just going to torch on the two sides. This one is very important to make sure you get it nice and straight. There we go. Looking at it here, making sure. Alright, and then we're going to cool this whole thing down before we sandwich our other half of our sleigh right on top the exact same way by just torching the edges. Okay, so you can see how fast and easy this is all going together. You can have a finished cake topper decoration in, less than an hour between pouring it and letting it cool and putting it all together. So it really, really is fast and efficient, and it's going to be the same every time because of that sculpture mat. It's going to make it perfect. Okay, so just testing, make sure it's all going to fit. And we will melt really, really well on those top edges, make sure they're nice and liquidy. And then immediately line it up and set it down. Okay, I'm going to stand this up while it's still a little warm in case I need to tweak it to make sure it's all going to sit properly. Alright, and there we have our finished sleigh. You can see that beautiful design down in there, and of course you could pick out which places you wanted the design. If you just wanted it on the sides, if you just wanted it on the inside, you can have all that customizability to make it exactly how you want it. The pattern did transfer pretty well into the rails because I was nice and quick with it, but if I wanted to, and I'm going to probably do, is just paint a little bit of silver luster dust mixed with alcohol along the rails just to make them stand out and to add a little bit of variation to our sleigh.
Hi, my name's Paul Bradford and welcome to Module 2, Sugar Paste Fondant Techniques. So the first thing you learn on Module 2 is all about the sugar paste fondants, the good things, the bad things and what to look out for to create absolutely fantastic cakes. So then we take you on to the next stage, and that's how to colour up your sugar paste stroke fondant. And then after that I'm going to take you on to how to paint on sugar paste, how to create a beautiful little yellow daisy with some leaves. And then we're going to move on to how to make a sugar rose. Now sugar roses are the classic rose on any wedding cake, birthday cake, celebration cake. You're going to love how easy it is to make these beautiful roses. I'm then going to show you how to make very, very simple punched flowers and punched leaves before then we move on to the actual cake itself. And within the cake, I'm going to show you different techniques, how to make swags, how to make ruffles, how to do a fabric effect, and then to finish it off, I'm going to show you how to make a fabric bow. As you can see, Module 2 is absolutely full of great techniques for any budding cake designer. So come on, let's get started.
Alright, now that we have all of our different decorations, we get to put them together into one final showpiece. So first we're going to plan, we're going to figure out where everything is going to go. So I have my sleigh here, I have my tree, okay, so that's going to go somewhere here, and we do this just because we want to make sure it's all going to look good together, and remember that Isomalt, when it's stuck, is stuck, so we don't want to have to move anything. Okay, so my shards are going to go kind of in the back there. But I think what I'm going to do first is I want to add that light inside of the tree. So to do that, I'm going to use this little LED light, so you can see when you twist it. It's just like a balloon light here. And you can wrap it in plastic if you want. This is purely for display purposes, so I'm just going to put it in as is. But of course you could cover this up if you wanted to make sure if it's not a food safe. You absolutely could do that. So I'm just going to recess it into my base a little bit. Now you can see my tree is slipping and sliding around a little bit. That's just because there's a little bit of excess oil that's still on the base from the pan, so I am going to burn that away first, just by lightly torching over the whole thing. There we go. And then figuring out where I want my tree to go, right about there, I'm just going to torch really, really good. And I'm just going to recess the base of this light down and in and cool it so that it's straight up and down. That way the light is going to glow really nicely. Okay, and then I'm just going to let that cool there before we attach on our tree. Alright, perfect. So now we have our little light there, and I can use my torch. Oh, look how cool that's going to look. I cannot wait to hold that up so you guys can see how awesome it looks. I'm just going to basically, you could do either torching or you can dip. I'm actually going to dip because this will fit into my bowl. You could torch around it and stick this down, but I'm just going to dip the base of the tree down into some liquid Isomalt as glue, and then stick that right on top, and that's going to stick it down really, really strong. So I'm just pressing that down there. To finish off the ice shards, I like to add a little bit of that edible snow, just painted onto the edges and onto the top to look like it's falling down and catching on all of the edges. And then the sleigh is going to go back up here. I'm going to slide this guy forward and start adding on my shards and just bit by bit putting the whole thing together. I'm going to finish the whole sculpture off with some snow drifts. So for this cup of edible snow that's nice and powdery, I'm going to use wafer paper ground up in a food processor mixed with a little bit of pearl dust and my edible glitter. That is going to create a nice powdery snow that I can pour into snow drifts all the way around. As always, we're going to spray the whole piece with the clear edible glaze spray after it's all put together. This will lock out moisture and humidity and make sure that your ice malts doesn't get sticky and stays nice and shiny. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Sidney's Sweet Adventures. I hope you learned a lot, and I will see you next time. Make sure to tune in 2 weeks because me and Chef Nicholas Lodge are doing another exciting collaboration that you won't want to miss. As always, you can always message me any questions on my social media, and make sure to follow me and tag me in pictures if you recreate any of these techniques or these projects, because I absolutely love to see your work. Until next time, keep life sweet!